I do want to speak a little bit about Andrew Little's supplementary order paper, which presents the option of having a yes/no vote in the initial referendum. And of course that is an incredibly sensible idea that could save millions of dollars for the country, and if the public polling that has been consistent right through is right, would likely see a vote to keep the existing flag and save that money for the country. It seems a sensible amendment, and I want to speak a little bit about that. But before I do, I've got a couple of other points that I want to make. The first is I want to query Gareth Hughes' earlier comment about not putting specifics in the bill. It seems a somewhat bizarre thing to say that you shouldn't tell the Governor-General what to do. All of the bills we put through Parliament invite the Governor-General to do what the Parliament has decided is the right thing to happen for New Zealanders. In fact, that's what we do with every bill that goes through the Parliament. So it is a very strange thing for him to say, and I wonder if when he takes his next call, he might explain quite how he came to that view that we shouldn't, in the Parliament anymore, suggest specific changes in law. It is very hard to understand. Look, the option presented in this bill is that we have 5 fresh flag designs, and the Honourable Trevor Mallard has eloquently articulated how that comes to be the case. I'm being generous. We're being in the spirit of generosity this evening. John Key's vanity project here has given a whole new lease of life because it leaves the Prime Minister open to choosing 5 flag designs. 5 flag designs that fit his particular criterion. And we've seen already that he has a preference for not having designers on the panel. He's expressed great confidence in this panel that has no people with previous flag design experience. And we end up with something that looks a lot more like commercial monikers, I would say, than proper international flags amongst many of the designs that we're faced with. I was asked earlier this evening on Backbenchers TV in the pre-record, and I don't want to spoil the show for those who are hanging out at home, whether I supported the Red Peak flag design. And I said, look, I honestly have not given it much thought yet. It's the new thing today. Who knows what we might have tomorrow? I mean, we're in a position where this changes day by day. It is a mockery of a process. It is an absolute mockery of a process that really belittles New Zealanders' engagement in wanting to change our national symbol. We're spending millions and millions of dollars on a process that seems to change day to day according to the Prime Minister's polling or political whims, and that cannot be a good process for New Zealanders. In my view, the right time to have this conversation is when we're debating whether we should become a republic or not. That is the logical time. I think we should be pushing out this debate, and so in part 1, there's a way of doing that. We could increase the number of days, mentioned in section 5, the amended section 13, that talks about 60 days before the commencement of the voting period, changing the designs. We could say we could change that to many, many more days, I think, with other tweaks in the amendment. There'll be people who know the subtleties of this process better than I that would know whether we can push it out there. But I'm interested from the Minister and the Chair whether she thinks that's technically possible to push it out through that mechanism. Certainly it would make the law a little bit more difficult to interpret at the other end. We could ask the Governor-General what they think of that. But we come to this point where we have a debate that changes day by day on what the options that should represent New Zealanders are. And that is not the way to unite the country. If we think right back to the start, this was presented to New Zealanders as a way of uniting the country under one flag option. It has done nothing but divide New Zealanders. This process has done nothing but divide New Zealanders. There are as many opinions, there are way more opinions than flag options, but what is clear is that New Zealanders are not clear on which option they want. In fact, there is, of the new options even, and we're leading towards a situation where the vast majority think it's such a schmozzle, that they would rather keep the existing flag than vote for any of the options. That's what the polls tell us. And instead of uniting a society in this process, we are paying millions and millions of dollars as a country to divide society. That cannot be the way this should have played out. That cannot be the way. But the Prime Minister has had it as his vanity project, and that has been why we've ended up this way. Now, I want to speak about, Mr. Chair, Thank you. I want to speak out about Mr Little's amendment. A very sensible amendment. A very, very sensible amendment. And yes, the member's right. The member and the chair obviously made the right call in choosing the leader of the opposition when I stood up to compete for a call, because this amendment does put the choice back in New Zealanders' hands. It tries to restore some dignity to a process that has ravaged out of control, that has become more about the Prime Minister's ego. We've seen some very erratic behaviour from the Prime Minister. We've seen him at cancer fundraisers asking for people to put their hands up if they're opposed to it and then berating them personally. That cannot be the kind of uniting process that people had in mind when they bought into this process in the beginning, those that did. And I understand the Prime Minister has now got the flag process hanging around his neck like an albatross. He is now, in many polls, less popular than Prime Minister Helen Clark was when she was thrown out of the Parliament. And he's still got a long way to go in his third term. His decline in popularity has been very steep. And his personal fortunes he seems to have attached to this vanity project about choosing the flag. And that must be a worrying place. It is a worrying place for the members opposite. They've been very quiet during this debate. We haven't seen very many calls at all from the National Party. They seem reluctant to defend it. And of course, the ones we can see of wearing Union Jacks, they're the ones that want to keep the flag process. It's a complete schmozzle on that side of the House. So this process that was supposed to unite New Zealand seems to be dividing us. And I would ask the government to really quickly adopt this sensible suggestion from Andrew Little that puts the choice back into New Zealanders' hands immediately about whether they want to change the flag or not. Save the country millions of dollars. Spend that money on early childhood education. Spend that money on building a new hospital in Dunedin where it's sorely needed. Spend that money on anything that would help our society get ahead and unite, rather than this process as prescribed in Part 1, which is dividing our country. Mr Chair, please, I don't beg the members opposite, but I implore them, please, members opposite, do consider voting for the Leader of the Opposition's amendment, which does give New Zealanders some dignity in the process, gives the Prime Minister perhaps a way out, and allows that money to be spent more wisely than on this process which has become such an albatross around the Prime Minister's neck. We need to have this debated another time, further down the track, when New Zealanders can be united in the final choice rather than divided. That is the kind of debate that a Labour government would lead if we were ever to look at changing the flag, because that is the kind of inclusive process that the Labour Party believes in. Going down a track that is about popularity, that is about commercial designs, and that is rushed and changed every day because of an erratic Prime Minister whose personal fate is tied to the outcome, is not the way to go, Mr Chair.